Hello students, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. K. Anil Kumar, Assistant Professor, Discipline of Anthropology, Indira Gandhi National Open University, New Delhi. Today we will discuss the module Indigenous Knowledge and Sustainability from the paper Tribal Cultures of India. So students, let us see what we are going to learn in this module. This module will help to explain the concept of indigenous knowledge. You will also learn about application of indigenous knowledge in the Indian context. However, there is no concrete definition of indigenous knowledge as such. It has been defined and redefined by many scholars, platforms, organizations, and so on. The World Bank has defined indigenous knowledge as the large body of knowledge, skills, and experiences that has been developed outside the formal educational system, which people apply to maintain, improve, and sustain their livelihood. Indigenous knowledge may be defined as the knowledge developed by local people of a given environment that has been passed down over generation to generation through oral tradition, kinship network, communal collection, social groups, etc., for judicious management of the resource on which their daily sustenance is depend upon. While scholars like Grenier and Malik and Mahapatra has defined indigenous knowledge as the traditional knowledge of local community existing within and developed around the specific conditions of men and women indigenous to a particular geographical area. Whereas Basu, also in Malik's and Mahapatra's book in 2010, opened that indigenous knowledge is found in people's memories and activities which are expressed in the form of stories, songs, belief systems, rituals, folklores, community laws, local language, cultural values, agricultural practices, material objects, plant species, and animal breeds. While Sharma adds that indigenous knowledge also referred to as traditional or local knowledge is embedded in culture and unique to a given location or society, with special reference to the rural poor whose life is built upon indigenous knowledge for decision making of communities in food security, human health, animal life, education, and natural resource management. Indigenous knowledge is often termed as traditional knowledge, local knowledge, community or rural knowledge, farmers' knowledge, tribals' knowledge, and so on. However, it is pertinent to understand that although the concept of indigenous knowledge has different forms, the meaning may appear synonymous, and moreover, it is not limited or confined to tribal population or any particular group as such. Important features of indigenous knowledge. Indigenous knowledge is the base of sustaining the ecosystem through judicious utilization and conservation practices of natural resources. Indigenous knowledge is practical and ecological sound knowledge system based on centuries of living close to the nature. Indigenous knowledge is also a multi-facet, like it covers various aspects and various areas of knowledge system, that is Indigenous knowledge you can find in water management, agriculture productivity, land use pattern, ethnomedicine, animal husbandry, food preparation, also preservation, seed storage, environmental conservation, weather prediction, human health, crop health, food security, sacred groves, etc. It is considered as a key drives of poverty reduction, livelihood improvement, and sustainable development that meets the needs of present without compromising the abilities of the future generation to meet their needs. In the face of growing inequalities of the environment, ecology, and the world at large, it is realized that indigenous knowledge system constitutes an important driving force for sustainable development that needs of the present without compromising the ability of the future generation to meet their needs. As I said, it is noteworthy that the world and the indigenous communities in it have a rich accumulation of knowledge based on their culture, environment, social, economy, politics, natural resources, etc., which may be according to Boone and hence the key drives for the poverty reduction, livelihood improvement, and attaining sustainability of a given environment. Since the time immemorial, the indigenous communities across the globe have coexisted with their own set of knowledge and cosmology about the environment they live in without much appreciation and recognition in the mainstream due to the fact that indigenous knowledge has its roots outside the formal institutions. It was also through United Nations Conference on Environment and Education in 1992, World Conservation Strategy of International Union and Conservations of Natural Resources in 1980, Bruegel and Commissions and World Commission on Environment and Development 1987, the concept of indigenous knowledge gained a worldwide recognition and its efficacy was realized. Indigenous knowledge is not confined or limited to tribal communities alone, but also to other ethnic, racial, cultural groups, etc., all over the world. However, existing studies has shown that indigenous knowledge is more strongly pronounced and developed among the rural communities, indigenous communities, marginalized section, rural people and women, etc., due to their close proximity and dependency on the given environment. Indigenous knowledge is often termed as traditional knowledge, local knowledge, community or rural knowledge, farmers' knowledge, tribals' knowledge, and so on. However, it is pertinent to understand that although the concept of indigenous knowledge has different forms, the meaning may appear synonymous, and moreover, it is not limited to the tribal people or population or any particular groups as such. Indigenous knowledge encompasses not only ecological conservation but also has social, religious, and cultural significance for a given community. It is interchangeably termed as various terms like local knowledge, traditional knowledge, ecological knowledge, traditional technical knowledge, etc. Many researchers done in this area have stressed that the indigenous knowledge provides useful framework, ideas, guiding principle, practices, and measures that can serve as a foundation for effective development process for restoring social, economic, and environmental resilience of the world at large. Bones and hence stress that indigenous knowledge systems encompasses years of analytical and experimental approaches to sustainable development and aids in reshaping development methods in sectors like politics and governance, agriculture, health, natural resource management, commerce and industries, etc. Agarwal confirms that indigenous knowledge are resource efficient and effective, and they have been able to conserve and manage the resources much better than externally imposed technocratic and resource intensive management system which the global world offers today. It is well established that India has strong and vibrant cultural diversity, and each cultural group or community have developed their own knowledge system over the years, which is orally passed down through oral tradition. A home to about 744 approximate tribal communities, ethnic groups, and diverse cultural background, India acts as a storehouse of indigenous knowledge, thereby depicting a rich yet curious intermixing of knowledge systems. Estimated that 70% of Indian population in rural based and so natural resources plays a crucial role in everyday life of the rural people. Forest and the natural resources in it moves beyond their ecological need. It conforms to their social, cultural, as well as worldviews, cosmology, and religious belief systems. The close dependency of the people on their immediate environment for their survival and livelihood enable them to develop knowledge about the given resources through daily sojourn, experiences, and utilization of the given resources. This is especially true for ethnic minorities, tribal communities, rural population, women, and other disadvantaged group in India who live close to nature and are dependent on forest and natural resources available for their livelihood. It is noteworthy that this close dependency establishes a kind of sympathetic or symbiotic relationship between the local communities and the given environment, which visible in their harmonic coexistence and sustainable approach towards resource management. Research conducted by Prajuli Das confirms the significant role of indigenous knowledge in environment sustainability, wherein the indigenous communities across the globe are conserving biodiversity in order to sustain themselves, which eventually conserves the whole environment. However, when it comes to policy making and developmental planning of natural resources, the most important voices are often left unheard, the voice of local communities who are the bearers of extensive ecological knowledge of the ecosystem. Application of indigenous knowledge, lessons from India. Small scale farmers in Bihar utilize neem leaves while storing grains after harvesting to protect it from insects, pests, and rodents, etc. The use of Nepalese alder and many species of bamboos in shifting cultivation also called slash and burn among the tribal communities of northeast India, fixes nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, which enhances soil fertility and food quality. For example, a recent study conducted by Mishra Singh and Kumar in 2011 in Bihar among marginal and small scale farmers brings out a vivid picture of indigenous knowledge in crop management practices. Example, mixed cropping of turmeric, potato, and chilies to increase the production of all three. Grain storage practices, as I explained, the neem leaves are used in storing grains to protect it from insects and pests. Crop watching practices, example, elevated platform and machan is constructed using wooden poles, local grasses, paddy straw, and crop residue to protect the crops from wild animals and birds. Prediction of weather or climate conditions, local farmers predicts heavy rain than that when ants move to a safer place with eggs in their mouth. Soil health and fertility management. Farmers utilize farm-based manure and green manure instead of chemical fertilizers to enhance the soil fertility and food quality. Plants and animals diseases. Farmers believe that application of paste of wheel reduces shoulder pain of working ox, while mixed dose of turmeric, ginger, and garlic keeps foot and mouth disease away. Human health practices. Example, common practices of planting trees of people and tulsi in and around residential area produces oxygen, which is considered beneficial for all living organism, or application of lukewarm paste of turmeric, onion, dub grass, mustard oil for pain relief of any kind of external injury, etc. Although the local farmers have been applying simple measures and organic knowledge for conserving and maintaining sustainability of the environment, yet it is stressed that such age-old existing have been ignored or sidelined to accommodate incoming modern technology, especially in agricultural system of a state. The tribal communities in Northeast India extensively practice shifting cultivation, also called slash and burn, since time immemorial, and it is found that these communities have developed their own knowledge system in their close existence with the given environment. The work of Ramakrishnan of 2000 explores that the use of Nepalese alder, as I explained, and many species of bamboo in shifting cultivation as a part of traditional agro-ecosystem management in the mountains region of northeast India, in which the former fixes nitrogen while the latter conserve potassium and phosphorus for better soil fertility and food production. The traditional concept of sacred grove, sacred space and forest, clan forest and traditional managed forest areas, etc., constitute about 90% of Meghalaya total forest area, which enables the local communities to conserve forest cover, trees and other wildlife and resources. A significant study of Tiwari in Meghalaya, Northeast India confirms the ecological knowledge of tribal communities in environment sustainability, which is inherently developed in their harmonious existence with the given environment by a way of constructing their worldview and cosmology around it. The concept of sacred groves, village restricted forest, village supply forest, clan forest and other traditional managed forests, which comprises, as I explained you, about 90% of Meghalaya total forest area, enables the tribal communities to nurture and conserve forest trees in the vicinity of their habitations near water sources, steppe slopes, and other ecological sensitive regions. This forest cover is a home to rich aquatic as well as ter- terrestrial biodiversity and adheres to diverse species of medicinal plants and animals, wild foods, herbs, and many other economically important resources. Such traditional conservation of forest and forest cover not only helps in conserving biodiversity and natural resources but also act as a safety net and resource ground for the communities. As such, the sacred forest is, according to the local belief, the home of deity who protects the village from natural calamities, famine, and disease while providing vital requirements in a daily life such as fuel, food, construction, materials, water, medicinal herbs, edible plants, etc. The local communities in Ladakh incorporates mixed cropping, crop rotation, organic waste management, recycling of nutrients through the use of livestock for plowing and threshing, non-utilization of chemical fertilizers, etc. in the traditional agriculture system, which enhances high quality yielding while maintaining soil structure and structure. Rural women in Uttarakhand plays a key role in conserving civil forests and initiates painting of board leaf trees, which is believed to increase oxygen level in the atmosphere. The recent initiative of rural women, as I said, in Uttarakhand, India, reaffirms active participation of women in environmental movement against the backdrop of increasing global climate change. Here, women plays a key role in reviving and conserving civil forest in the face of several obstacles. As such, the women member in the panchayat takes initiative measures to encourage, as I told you, planting of broadleaf trees to increase oxygen level in the environment. Similar study conducted by Madegowda in 2009 among the Sogalis tribe of Chamaranjan district, Karnataka, brings out a rich traditional knowledge of the ecology, forest conservation, agricultural system, land use pattern, and other resource management, etc., upon which an intricate web of their social, cultural, and economic life is constructed. The study suggested that about 62 colonies of Sogalis are located within the periphery of Biligiri Ramaswamy Temple Wildlife Sanctuary, and as a result, they have had continuous and intimate connection with the forest, driving most of their basic requirements such as food, fodder, fuel, fruit, medicine, herbs, and so on. The Sogalis practice controlled ground fire where they believe in good for the control of invasive species, regeneration of local indigenous species, dormancy of seeds, control pests and disease, and also regenerates food for wildlife. They also practice shifting cultivation, in which they cultivate the land for an era of two till the soil loses its fertility, and then they move on to another patch of land. As they move on, they provide food such as banana, tropica, cucumber, bottle gourd, pumpkin, tubers, mustard, etc., which they left behind to wild animals, is an attempt to conserve and balance biodiversity. It is further stressed this tribal had good water management practices, and so whenever they clear land for shifting cultivation, they dug two or three pits or well alongside the field of consumption and irrigation, while also serving as a waterholes for wildlife. In addition, the Sogalis possesses rich folklores and folktales through which they reflect indigenous knowledge of fauna, flora, dense forest, waterfalls, flowers, valley, etc., while enabling them to transfer this knowledge from one generation to the next, and this helps to conserve and keep alive the knowledge of the community. Similarly, the same fate of traditional agriculture is witnessed by the local villagers in Ladakh, which fall under western Himalayas in the state of Jammu and Kashmir, India. The traditional agricultural system of the Ladakhis is characterized by careful system of crop rotation, organic waste management, recycling of nutrients through the use of livestock for plowing and threshing, and non-utilization of chemical fertilizers, etc., which enhances high quality yield. But it is found that this traditional agricultural system is in the process of erosion with the introduction of chemical fertilizers and high yielding varieties by Indian government, thereby declining the soil fertility and structure. This has not only threatened the traditional ecological knowledge of the people, but it has also brought about structural changes in socio-cultural system at large. Impact of modernization in traditional belief system, religious institution, etc. The concept of sacred groves is declining with the influence of modernization and religious conversion. However, these knowledge systems are, in the contemporary times, stands highly vulnerable to global forces and market, modern science and technology, developmental initiatives, impact of traditional religion, intellectual property rights, and emerging concept of private property, environmental problems, non-transfer of knowledge, gender disparities, power conflicts, and biopiracy, etc. Many emerging studies have argued that global oriented market forces many countries, especially the developing ones like India, to promote development policies that focus on rural based industrialization and increased agricultural productivity through chemical inputs, biotechnology, modern mechanization, etc., which has not only marginalized traditional agriculture system but also disempowers local farmers and their indigenous knowledge. The growth of commercial forestry has also contributed to erosion of indigenous knowledge in many parts of India, especially in the northeast region, where the land are increasingly cleared to meet fuel requirement, construction material, and also to accommodate increasing population. The indigenous knowledge also stands susceptible to misappropriation and misuse by the modern science and rich technology bodies because of its accessibility and efficacy, particular knowledge pertaining to treatment of various diseases, cosmetics, medicinal plants, etc. Therefore, the exploitation of traditional knowledge in the form of bioprospecting or biopiracy is a threat to the indigenous community and their knowledge system, in which the indigenous knowledge of communities is misused by scientists of developed countries to develop certain drugs or so on without acknowledging the intellectual property rights of rightful communities. It is pertinent to acknowledge the fact that the impact of modern worldview and influence of other religion also contributes its share in eroding indigenous knowledge by way of bringing down the traditional concept of sacred groves, sacred forest or space, which has its roots in traditional religion of nature worship and animistic religion. For a long, this knowledge system of the local communities across world have sustained the fragile earth system at a large while deriving their basic requirements from its resources. It is well established that this indigenous knowledge or ecological knowledge not only sustain their daily needs but it also form a major part of their economy, social, cultural and religious institutions, especially those living in rural locations and on fringes of society. This means the impact of environmental crisis and loss of indigenous knowledge is mostly felt by those living on the margins, especially poor men, small scale farmers, tribal communities, women and other marginal population due to the fact that exist in close proximity with nature and are the harbinger of the environment. The analysis of sacred groves in India in the works of Malhotra and Agarwal reports that though majority of deities associated with sacred groves are female, women are not considered for priesthood and generally they do not even have access to these areas. Existing research studies have stressed that the livelihood rights of unprivileged population, especially rural women, are being deprived, which in turn make affects the ecological balance because they are the storehouse of indigenous knowledge. These studies further argues the gender mainstreaming in resource ownership and decision making is needed of the hour for the world to attain the goal of sustainable development. So student, let us summarize what we have learned in this module. First we have learned about the definitions of indigenous knowledge and how indigenous knowledge is useful for the sustenance of tribal communities. It is further recommended that the developmental platform, policy makers, environmentalists, conservationists, natural resource management committee, etc. should incorporate local communities in planning and developmental of natural resources besides utilizing their ecological knowledge and resource management method for conserving the resources at large. For long, these indigenous knowledge systems of the local communities across the world have sustained the fragile earth system at large while driving their basic requirements from its resources. It is well established that this indigenous knowledge or ecological knowledge not only sustain the daily needs but it also form a major part of their economy, social, cultural and religious institutions especially. Those living in rural locations and on the fringes of the society, this means the impact of environmental crisis and loss of indigenous knowledge is mostly felt by those living on margins, especially poor men, small scale farmers, tribal communities, women and other marginal population due to the fact that they exist in close proximity with nature and are the harbinger of the environment. The analysis of sacred groves in India at the works of Malhotra and Agarwal reports that though majority of deities associated with AGS are female, women are not considered for priesthood and generally they do not even have access to these areas. Existing research studies have stressed that the livelihood rights of unprivileged population, especially rural women, are being deprived, which in turn may affects the ecological balance because they are storehouse of indigenous knowledge. These studies further argues that gender mainstreaming in resource ownership and decision making is the need of the hour for the world to attain the goal of sustainable development. In this light, there is a dire urgency to acknowledge and recognize indigenous knowledge of tribal groups and indigenous communities, keep in mind its ecological significance and efficacy in conservation measures. In addition, many emerging studies have put forth the urgency to give a formal platform to indigenous knowledge systems by way of adopting, redefining, and integrating it onto mainstream policy and programs for the world to achieve greater, if not complete, sustainability development. Thank you.